Okay.
Okay, go.
Okay, so the Abba, Tchias HaMesim, the resurrection of the dead, the next world, what exactly is the destiny of Klal Yisrael? And what's become clear, hopefully, from the past number of shiurim, is that there's a very big disconnect between those Rishonim that followed the approach of philosophy, as opposed to the Rishonim that definitely had the tradition and followed the approach of Kabbalah. So I figured that might be a good idea, maybe for the next few shiurim, if possible, to discuss a number of questions. First of all, how did such a thing happen? How did it happen in such a way, just even historically speaking, that you have such a major portion of Torah, not just any portion of Torah, the deepest portion of Torah, Pnimius Torah, the inward, the most secretive, the deepest, again, like I said, the most sublime aspect of Torah, completely ignored and unknown to such a major group of Rishon, not just any people, the Rambam, the greatest of the great, the Rambam himself. How is it possible that such a thing happened where you could have the Rambam completely unaware of the tradition of Kabbalah? That's question number one, how it happened. And the deeper question is, why did such a thing happen? How did Hashem allow such a thing to take place? What's the purpose of such a thing, of keeping such a major aspect, such a major level of Torah completely hidden to such unbelievably great people? And for whatever the reason that it was hidden, so why did it become widespread knowledge and become much more accessible as the generations went on? So these are the topics that I think are important to discuss. So as an introduction, we have to talk about what Kabbalah is exactly. Okay, we're not obviously going to learn Kabbalah, but just to know what it is. Let me begin as follows. The Gemara says in a number of places that whenever a person learns any level of Torah, whenever he's learning, a person should always learn al-minas lasos, in order that the learning should be practical. I mean, whatever it is that you're learning, again, obviously we know that even halachas which are not applicable nowadays, or halachas which are most likely never going to be applicable, there's still a mitzvah of learning. So but again, whenever a person does learn, it should be with the knowledge, with the concept, with the motivation of being able to apply it practically. So the question is as follows. When a person is learning Hilchos Shabbos, for example, it's relatively easy for that to be practical, for him to learn for the purpose of applying it in his life. You have to keep Shabbos. You learn Hilchos Tefillin. It's very easy. You're learning and you're having in mind that I'm learning in order to understand practically what to do when it comes to Tefillin. How does a person learn Kabbalah? How does a person learn Pnimius Torah, Al-Minas Lasos, in order to accomplish? What practical application does that aspect of Torah have? What practical application could you use that for? So when you learn the Svarim, it becomes clear that generally speaking, the Svarim will tell you that there are two or three basic mitzvahs whose practical application, kiyum, fulfillment, only comes through a person who studies Kabbalah. Many Svarim will tell you that the mitzvah of Avas Hashem and Yiras Hashem, loving Hashem and fearing Hashem, can only truly 100% be satisfied, be fulfilled by someone who knows Kabbalah. When a person learns Kabbalah, which we'll talk about what exactly it is in a few moments, when a person learns the esoteric, the deeper parts of Torah, and it becomes clear to him how closely Hashem is involved in this world and how everything in this world is somehow intimately connected to Hashem, that automatically inspires within a person a tremendous amount of love and fear that he otherwise would not be able to tap into. So that's what many Svarim will tell you, that the Al-Minas Lasos, the practical application of Kabbalah in a person's daily life is by using such knowledge to fulfill the mitzvah of Avas Hashem, of loving Hashem and Yiras Hashem and fearing Hashem. The other thing that the Svarim will tell you, and this is something interesting, that both the Talmidim of the Gra and the Talmidim of Wtntu have both said the same thing. This is something that's found in the writings of Rabbi Yitzchak Chaver, who was a Talmid of the Gra, Talmid of the Gra, and this is also found in the writings of Rav Tzadok, who was obviously one of the, a great master. They both say the same thing, that another mitzvah which is not possible to be fulfilled completely without a true knowledge in Kabbalah is the mitzvah of Yichud Hashem, of believing in the unity and the oneness of Hashem. The Svarim tell us the Misnagdim and the Hasidim both say the same thing, that to understand, to believe 100% and to understand how is it that this whole world, which seems to be so contradictory. There's so many different qualities and different elements and different facets of reality, how they all come together in the oneness of Hashem that could only be truly understood by someone who has a firm grasp in Kabbalah. So that's what all the storm will tell you. But the truth is that there's something much more historically accurate when it comes to what the purpose of Kabbalah was, historically speaking, and the fact that we're not able necessarily to fulfill this aspect of the practical application of Kabbalah nowadays is somewhat tragic. The original practical application of what Kabbalah was the following. It was a necessary tool in order to become a prophet, in order to become a Navi. This is something that all the Svarim hint to, and it's specifically talked about in only a very few Svarim actually, is this idea that Kabbalah, the knowledge of Kabbalah, Sisrei Torah, Sod itself, secrets of Torah itself, was a necessary component and a necessary education to allow a person to ascend to the level of being a Navi. And without that knowledge, it would have been impossible for a person to actually become a Navi. Now, to clarify this point, and again, how this it'll become clear over time, hopefully, how this has to do with the evolution of Kabbalah and how it happened that you can have the Rambam unaware of this. To explain how this happens, why is it that Kabbalah is so necessary to become a Navi, and what was the practical steps for the person to take in order to become a Navi, to achieve that great level of attachment to Hashem, it's important to be aware of the following. The Gemara already tells us in Chagiga that Kabbalah is divided into two parts. There's something that's called Ma'aseh Bereishis, the workings of creation, and there's another part that's called Ma'aseh Merkava, the workings of the chariot. Generally speaking, the way the Mekubalim themselves explain these two separate components of Kabbalah in general is the following. Ma'aseh Bereishis means, the workings of creation means the theoretical aspect of Kabbalah, meaning the mathematical, scientific knowledge that Kabbalah tells a person about how is it that this world was created by Hashem. How is it? What exactly is the chain that connects this world and the world above? All the different levels of the Olam Yisrael, again, all the words that you'll find in the Psalm, the higher world, Atzilus, Bria, Malachim, all the different things that are in between our physical world and Hashem Himself, that chain that connects Hashem to this world and how Hashem infuses life into this world, the evolution, so to speak, the spiritual evolution of reality, that's all called Ma'aseh Bereishis. Now, when a person studies Ma'aseh Bereishis, this aspect, nothing necessarily miraculous takes place. This is a very cerebral aspect of Torah, just like anything else. It's mathematical, it's scientific, it's very, very complicated. But that's what 98% of all Kabbalah are out there. 98% of them are discussing this aspect of Ma'aseh Bereishis. It's the theoretical, it's the scientific, basically, in a nutshell, it's the spiritual evolution of reality. How is it that Hashem created the world? All the steps that connect heaven and earth, everything in between. That's what Ma'aseh Bereishis is. Now that was very, very necessary for a Navi to know, to be an expert in. If a person was not expert in Ma'aseh Bereishis, in the workings of creation, in knowing the highways and the conduit and the pipelines that connect this world and the world above, there's no question it's not even close, he cannot become a Navi. But the next step, however, of becoming a Navi is to take that knowledge and to apply it practically. What that means is as follows. What a Navi, the prophetic experience, all the Svarim tell us, the Ramchal talks about this a lot in Derech Hashem. The prophetic experience basically was the Navi disconnecting his neshama from his body to a certain extent and sort of riding his neshama back up to its source to heaven. Again, what this means is very, very complicated. And again, maybe over time we'll get to these things in topics of our shiurim as follows, topics of Nevu and so on. But what a Navi needed to do to experience prophecy was to elevate himself, to elevate his neshama back up through the ladder, back up through the chain that connects this world and the next and the world above, climbing that ladder, going through the specific channels and highways that connect these two worlds, and returning ultimately back to the source of all sources, which is Hashem Himself. And it was through that connection or that reconnection of his neshama back up to its source that information was transferred over as a prophetic experience. So the Navi, in order to do this, would be a similar, a mashal to this would be if a person wants to go take a trip. A person wants to go on a cross-country trip. He wants to drive from New York to California. Then you need two things. You need to know the highways to take, You need to know which exits to get off and which highways to stay on and so forth. When to make a left, when to make a right. You need to know cerebrally, intellectually, the map. But then the other thing that you need is to know how to drive. You need to know practically how to get into your car and to actually drive and take those highways. That's exactly the process that would take place with the Navi. Maisa Bereshis means the knowledge that the Navi had of the map of how to get from this world to the higher world. That's the map of Maisa Bereshis. The next step, which is called Maisa Merkava, the workings of the chariot, would be to take that knowledge and to actually practically apply it and to actually travel that road that he intellectually comprehended and absorbed in his knowledge of Maisa Bereshis. That would mean, now how do you do that? What car do you take to travel that highway up to heaven? So the way to do that was a very, very dangerous and difficult process. It involved intense meditations. It involved an intense focus on the names of Hashem, divine names of Hashem, an intense level of spiritual energy that the Navi would connect himself to, and using that energy and the names of Hashem that he meditated on and so on, he would use that as a vehicle, as his chariot, so to speak, to ride and to eventually get to the higher world. Again, and he had to have a very intimate knowledge of the highways and byways in between. Again, coming from Maisa Bereshis. These are the two aspects of what Kabbalah is: Maisa Bereshis and Maisa Merkava. A person can spend a lifetime learning Maisa Bereshis and never even get to the next level, which is Maisa Merkava. And as I mentioned, all the Kabbalahs from that you'll find in any farm store or so on, 98% of them are focused exclusively on Maisa Bereshis. Very, very, very few Svarim printed are involved in the process of Maisa Merkava, how to take that knowledge of Maisa Bereshis and actually use meditations and divine names to actually drive those highways that you learn about in Maisa Bereshis. Very, very few Svarim are mentioned, even discuss such an idea. Again, that's what Kabbalah was historically as far as the Navi. I guess now maybe we'll open up into questions now, because again, this is going to be involved. There's many, many different parts to that. But just what my point is right now, I just want to make it clear what the practical application of what Kabbalah was historically originally. By the times of Tanakh, what Kabbalah, the essential purpose of what Kabbalah, why it was studied and how it was studied, was for the purpose of not just fulfilling the mitzvah of loving Hashem, fearing Hashem, and knowing Hashem is one, but it was to become a Navi. The practical application was to use that knowledge and to actually ascend from level to level, to eventually get to the ultimate level of attachment, which was a prophetic experience itself. Okay, and from there we'll see, historically speaking, what changed and how things changed and how things were transmitted from generation to generation. Okay.
May I ask a question?
Dovi, am I supposed to hear something? Oh, okay. Oh. Okay, so that's a very, very good question. So that Gemara that you're referring to is Gemara Chagiga. The Gemara talks about that a person should not question or delve into what's before, what's behind, what's above, what's below. The explanation of that Gemara, there's two points that's necessary to be clarified when it comes to that Gemara. Generally speaking, again, this is something that we're going to see over the coming weeks, B'ezras Hashem, that it's 100% true. This knowledge of both the workings of creation and the workings of the chariot are very, very sensitive topics. These are issues which, because of their esoteric nature, if a person doesn't have the proper preparation and the proper mental ability and fear of heaven and religious commitment, this knowledge can be dangerous. It can veer a person off. And again, historically, we've had people, unfortunately, that have used this knowledge in a negative way. It affected them negatively, and they went way off. When a person, it's one thing to go off the derech because you have a Yetzer Hara, but to go off the derech because of unbelievable confusion that comes from this aspect of Torah, a person can go very, very off. So it's a very dangerous thing. So first of all, from that Gemara, just the first thing that the commentaries point out is the first thing that the Gemara is trying to tell you is that you should go in, whenever a person does get involved in these topics, and again, like I mentioned, we're not getting involved in these topics. It's nothing to worry about for us. We're just talking about them. The first thing the Gemara is telling you is that you should be aware that it's dangerous. You should be aware that it's dangerous, and the only person that should get involved in these things is someone that has the proper preparation, the proper hadracha, the proper instruction from a person that's knowledgeable, very knowledgeable in these areas. Second of all, what's necessary to understand in that Gemara, when the Gemara talks about what's before, it's a very, very deep inyan, but what that Gemara is telling us is that a person should not try to think about what Hashem is, so to speak, before he was willing to reveal himself through creation. This is a topic, again, it's something that really, we should probably spend a shir on it by itself, but this is something that all the Mekubalim stress very, very much, that all the mysteries, all the higher worlds, all the spiritual reality that they discuss, the Arizal himself, all the great mysteries that they're talking about, it's all from creation and on. It's all that aspect of Hashem that he allows us to see, that he allows us to connect to through creation, through the mitzvahs that he taught us, through the world that he created. But that aspect of Hashem, which is before creation, so to speak, or the aspect of Hashem that he's not showing us through creation, that's what the Gemara is talking about. A person should not question what's before and what's after. Meaning, don't try to comprehend Hashem's essence. Rather, a person should try to toil and to connect to that aspect of Hashem that he's willing to allow us to see, that he's willing to show us through his Torah mitzvahs. And again, what exactly that means, again, I know that I'm probably saying a lot of things which are out there, but that's what that Gemara is talking about. So the Gemara is not saying not to learn Kabbalah. It's saying that when a person does learn Kabbalah, to know where the starting point is. And the starting point is that aspect of Hashem that he allows us to comprehend and to experience through Torah and mitzvahs, but not that aspect of Hashem that he remains to himself. Just like any person down here, there are certain aspects of my personality which I decide to keep personal, and there are certain aspects of me that I'll share with friends and family. It's the same thing with Hashem. There are certain aspects of his essence that he's willing to share with us, and certain aspects that he's not. The Gemara is telling us to be involved, to be aware that when you learn Kabbalah and these things, Ma'aser Bereishis or Ma'aser Merkava, what your job is to understand is that aspect of Hashem which he allows us to see through creation, but not that aspect that he wants to keep personal and private. Again, that's as best as I can do in this short time to explain that. Yes, that's a very, very good question. That's exactly what I want to eventually get to. And it's going to become clear that not only was there nothing missing in their Avodas Hashem, but the very fact that this aspect of Torah was hidden from them, and nevertheless they became, the leaders of the Jewish people for all time. Not only was it not a hindrance of their Avodas Hashem, their specific mission in the history of the Jewish people was accomplished only because of the fact that these secrets of Torah were hidden from them. And again, this is something that hopefully over time will, in the next few weeks, it will become clear. But that's the thing. This inyan, this topic, which is so important and so fundamental, it can't be that it happened to be just randomly that the Rambam wasn't aware of the tradition of Kabbalah. It can't be. And I'm not saying he was aware. He was, the vast majority of Mefarshim accept the fact that the Rambam was not aware of the tradition of Kabbalah, but my point is that it can't be that Hashem just allowed that to happen randomly. It had to be for a specific reason, and we're going to see that it did not hold back their Avodas Hashem or their Madrega at all. If anything, it allowed them to excel in their specific mission in life. Again, that's something that we're going to hopefully should become clear over the next coming weeks. Thank you very much, guys.